out of the ordinary insights. Brought to you by Investec Specialist Bank.
Speaking to Mark Steinhobel, the chairman of VWV. Thanks again. Let's just look at the big opening and closing ceremony of the 2010 FIFA World Cup. You were responsible for both of those events.
Yes, indeed, a big challenge, and probably the biggest single event we've ever done. Yeah.
Did you go through a stringent tender process to get?
Oh yes, it began about 3 years out. In fact, we pitched along with about, I think, 50 different companies, three or four international companies, for the work, and the process of selection took nearly 9 months. There were, I think, 6 different rounds we went through as they filtered it down to less and less different contenders, and yes, an interesting challenge just to win it. Just to win it was, I think, cost us R500,000 just in outside costs.
Was it worth it?
It was. It was not without its challenges, as you can imagine, but an enormously uplifting experience at the end of the process. Literally, the biggest thing for us was how many people from all over the world responded, saying how proud they were, because it was watched obviously in many different countries. And because they felt that we got to kind of this essence, this sparkling kind of enthusiasm that South Africans displayed so prominently during the World Cup and always do. So yes, very heartwarming. Has
that given you a lot of visibility? Have you seen a lot more workflow as a result of the FIFA World Cup?
Not really, Bronwyn. Those are isolated. Important but isolated events that unless we made a concentrated push to get into that business in a bigger way, in fact what they do, interestingly, is that they're dangerous to us, because our corporate clients and our branded clients are our bread and butter. So what we do in a case like that is we ring fence that event completely away from the rest of the business. We even move it off site into its own offices, its own teams, its own crew, and they don't touch the rest of the business. Otherwise, it kind of would lay over the business like a blanket and just consume energy, which would cost us relationships.
Mark, how do you define your leadership style?
Me personally?
You personally.
That's a really good question. I would say very open. We're a business that has no politics, that where everything is, there's nothing hidden. And in that kind of situation, you never have to worry about anything. Every honesty prevails. Politics are forbidden, which is not always easy, as you can imagine. And I think what's very important to me is that we just continue to challenge ourselves, continue to push very hard. We have a very close relationship with the similar companies like ourselves around the world. So we benchmark ourselves not locally, but internationally against a number of very big players.
In the creative environment?
Yes.
What kind of people do you like to surround yourself with?
Very independent-minded people. Ours is a business that's moving at 120 miles an hour all the time. So sadly, we don't have the luxury of gently introducing people into our business and ensuring that they get trained up correctly and are looked after. It's pretty much sink or swim, and we need very strong-minded people to survive that world. So the business literally gets rid of anyone who isn't moving at enough pace. So we need bold thinkers, we need strong-willed people who are prepared to stand up and take a view, and they work intensely hard, Bronwyn. They work unbelievable hours, and they love it, I think.
We've been through a tough economic environment, and one of the first things corporates do when we get to a tough environment is pull back on their advertising and marketing spend. How have you managed to keep yourself at the top of the game despite the economics?
I think we've probably reached critical mass. First of all, we have distributed the business over a number of global. We have quite a strong presence in Africa. We have a very strong presence in the United States, and we work in other countries all the time. So that dilutes the impact of any particular surge particularly in this market. But the truth is, we've got to the point where the business, which used to be very kind of cyclical, is big enough, I guess, to flatten those peaks and troughs out. And we are very careful to continually be looking into the future and coming up with new innovative technologies. So the business has a number of different
So you
subsidiaries.
diversified effectively.
Yes,
So
diversified kind
a tough environment in one will be offset perhaps by a buoyant environment in Nigeria.
Exactly.
When you talk about Africa, where are you operating?
We don't have a permanent presence yet in Africa. We have partnerships in Nigeria and in Kenya, which are developing into permanent offices. And the aim is to have a hub in Nigeria and a hub in Kenya, and then just South Africa, where we service a lot of Africa from at the moment. So one has to be terribly cautious about putting down roots, physical roots. We have a strong presence, and we're able to do very large projects. For example,
So the joint venture model works for you in Africa?
Yes, it does. Reservedly, it's always something you have to be careful of. But yes, without local knowledge, we will never move out of South Africa's borders, and that's been true of our experience in the United States and everywhere we've gone. Definitely, Africa is definitely not for sissies, as you know. But there is an astonishing amount of growth in certain parts of Africa that we simply cannot ignore.
What is your advice to fellow entrepreneurs?
Stick to your guns. Stick to your guns. Decide to do something and just do it the very, very best that anybody ever could. And be really careful about bouncing around and taking opportunities opportunistically as they come along, and being seduced by things that look really, really promising, because they will take your mind off your core business and they will prevent you from being successful.
10 years down the line, where do you see VWV?
More of the same. Bigger. We will have a much bigger business in the United States, and we will have a very strong business in Africa and the Middle East.
One of the risks you've possibly been presented with is the fact that you have two very large clients by way of SAB and Pick n Pay, and that in itself poses a risk if one or the other was to disappear from the fold.
Yes and no. The SAB Miller example has fragmented away into about 20 different clients, either different countries, managers, or different divisions or different brands, and each one of them to some degree, or in fact completely, is autonomous. Certainly the different countries and the different divisions around the world of SAB Miller.
So they make decisions in isolation of one another?
Completely. So if we lost the US business, which we're tendering for right now for another 3-year contract, we would certainly, that would not impact on any of the rest of the business we're doing with them around the world. So yes, it's I guess a lot of eggs in one basket, but it's actually a lot of little baskets, which is better.
And Pick n Pay, give us a little colour around that contract.
Pick n Pay isn't a contracted client. We've been working for Pick n Pay for many, many years, and we have deep relationships with a number of different stakeholders, again, within Pick n Pay. So again, it's not one client. We work very strongly with the corporate side of the business as well as with the marketing side of the business. And things, for example, like we produce their in-house video newsletter. So there are, again, pockets of work that we do for Pick n Pay that are independent of each other.
What is the biggest threat to your survival as a communication company? One would assume that there are a number of companies out there, F&B case in point, who are now doing all their media and marketing in-house, rather than using media agencies. I know that doesn't necessarily fall into your space, but you could see the middleman being squeezed further and further.
Yes and no. We would quite strongly disagree with that because yes, a lot of the marketing mix can be taken in-house, but the highly specialized pieces of it, and a good example is social media. So everybody right now, including F&B, I'm sure, has a social media person, maybe even a little division, maybe a little department of social media people. And they're furiously tweeting and they're furiously texting and doing all the things that are perceived to be the right things for social media right now. And again, with respect, we would say that what they should be doing and what they will do is they will find a specialist who's able to interpret the world of social media for what it is rather than what it looks like.
Do you see that as a huge growth opportunity for you going forward?
To be honest, we haven't we're quite far down the track, but we haven't even got our head around it yet. We have some very strong opinions on it, and we're doing a lot of really adventurous things, but we are struggling, like everyone else is, to understand why this phenomenon has taken hold so unbelievably quickly and ubiquitously, and what it means for the very behavior of people, of consumers.
Is there anybody doing it right, in your opinion, at this point?
No, we don't. We certainly can't see anybody. There are no great success stories. There are stories that got X amount of likes or whatever, but for every one of those, there is a horror story about how it's being manipulated, and how the community, the social community, and it shouldn't be called social media, by the way. It should be called social networking, because that's what it is, not a media type. So the very nature of the networking that takes place defies marketing speak. It's designed to prevent you messaging. So you need to be careful about going up against that at your peril, because it could in fact work against you, and it is working against a lot of brands right now. It's mainly used as a defensive mechanism, because hostile social media or social networking attacks can be absolutely critical and can sink a business. We've seen a lot of that in the US.
Mark, just finally, what do you want your legacy to be?
That's a good question. I think just that we were the best at everything we tried, or to the best of our ability, we continued to try to be our best.